Love, love, until I feel the breath of the Spirit flowing in me.
Hello, welcome to Spirit of Life. I'm Geraldine Lee, your host, and our guest is Father Dishan Kandapa. Welcome, Father.
Thank you, Geraldine.
I'd love to hear about how you had that calling to the priesthood. If you could call it a call, is that what you would describe it as?
Yes, for sure. It's a long journey for me. It's different for every person called to the priesthood, of course. I'd say it began quite early, perhaps at the age of 6 or 7, when I sensed some sort of a calling to the priesthood. I didn't fully understand what it was, obviously, at that stage. It never left me. So that sense of calling to the priesthood, when I got into my teenage years, it was sort of in the background a bit. When I finished high school, I started studying to be an engineer.
You went to university?
I went to Monash Uni and started studying civil engineering, because that's one of my passions in terms of wanting to design buildings and bridges and things like that. Even in that time, there was a sense inside me that, look, this journey is great towards being an engineer, etc., but God's plan for me is to be a priest. It's a fairly quiet voice, but a voice which never sort of went away.
So an undercurrent.
Strong.
And were you active in the church during that time?
Active in the sense I used to go to daily mass, but I didn't really. I wasn't a youth leader, or I did nothing other than going to mass, really. The civil engineering course at Monash Uni is quite intense. We had sort of 30 hours of lectures per week and lots of assignments and things like that. So I was very much focused on the study, at the same time having that calling. It got quite complicated in terms of, at one stage, throughout the time I was growing up, I also sensed a drawing towards married life. I had the example of my parents who were happily married with 4 children, so I had that sort of dual desire in me, if you like, and I couldn't quite decide which way God was calling me. I was very comfortable sitting on the fence, to be honest. I didn't mind not knowing. I was comfortable thinking, well, God may call me to marriage, or perhaps it's the priesthood. But after sort of when I was about 25 or so, I thought, look, I better decide.
Yes, and were you a doctor? Had you done your doctorate by that stage?
I'd started studying towards a PhD in civil engineering once I'd finished my basic degree. That's kind of when I took discernment even more seriously, if you like. I did make the difficult call to the vocations director at the time, Father Paul Stewart, and said, look, I may be called to the priesthood, I'm not sure, but I also got a strong calling towards, I think I might be, I have a strong desire towards married life as well. And at that time I was going out with someone, and he did ask me, look, where do you think your heart is at this time? And I said straight away, well, I think it's with this lady towards marriage. And he's a very wise priest. He said, well, look, follow where your heart's leading currently, and if things work out and end up in marriage, that's excellent, that's fantastic. If it doesn't, feel free to come back. So I was hoping he'd close the door on priesthood at that point. I had been discerning for many years, and I thought, oh, well, look, I'll go and speak to the vocations director, and if he tells me I'm not called to the priesthood, then I can happily close that door and go along this path. But he didn't let me close the door fully. He kind of said, well, you go and follow your heart. Yeah. So I did. I was engaged to be married, and yet the call to the priesthood didn't leave me. So that's when I thought, oh, I'm in trouble here. I'm not quite sure. I thought once I was engaged that was my vocation, and then the calling to the priesthood would sort of subside, if you like, but it didn't. I didn't talk about the priesthood at all with my fiancée after we got engaged, and yet about 6 months down the track, it was she who actually kind of sensed that my heart was still towards the priesthood. And so she said, look, if if that's your calling, if that's where your heart is, you should follow that. And at that time, I didn't really want to go in that direction. But as soon as she started talking, it was very clear to me that that's God directing me through her, if you know what I mean.
Wow, she must have had strong faith herself.
Absolutely, yeah. So it was a courageous act, very painful for both of us, obviously. But I clearly knew, well, that's she's speaking the truth. That's where my heart is. And so I did. When I went back the second time to meet Father Paul, I was very nervous because I thought, look, you know, I had my chance. This time, he may not be as open, as friendly. So I called him up and said, look, can I come and speak to you again? And he asked me how things went, and I told him. And he said, look, I knew he'd come back. That was his words to me, and I was very touched by that. And yeah, so that was the journey to entering seminary life.
Yeah, so you started walking that road and you didn't look back.
I haven't. Yeah, that was in 2001.
Wow.
So quite a few years back now. But I got the very strong sense from then that, well, that's the direction God wants me.
Yes, that's wonderful. And what fed your faith? You were saying about your parents. You had a strong faith.
Yes, so I grew up, the first 15 years of my life was in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is predominantly a Buddhist country, 80% Buddhist, only 7% Catholic. But I thought I was growing up in an entirely Catholic country because my world growing up was entirely Catholic. I had my grandparents, all four grandparents were Catholic, practicing Catholics. Mum and Dad, strongly practicing Catholics, and my siblings my three siblings were practicing. We'd all go to Mass every week together, pray the Rosary at home in the evening. And our friends were Catholic. So
that fed your faith.
Absolutely. I thought the world was Catholic until I started to realise not everyone was Catholic. Yeah.
Yes. And now working as a priest, what do you enjoy the most?
Sure, it's very diverse. My life in the parish, I'm not quite sure what to expect after Mass. It might depends on what's happening at the time in the parish. Obviously, for example, now we just come out of the Easter season.
Yeah, that's really interesting. We need to go for a break now.
Sure.
You have been watching Spirit of Life. Stay tuned with us. We'll be back after the break. Hello, welcome back to Spirit of Life. My name is Geraldine Lee, your host, and our guest is Father Dishan Kandapa. He's been sharing about his faith journey. Hi, Father.
Hi, Geraldine.
You were sharing about what you find that you really enjoy about being a priest.
Yes.
And we talked about the Eucharist and about your work as a chaplain.
Yes, for sure. So in terms of celebrating Mass, it's obviously a very powerful encounter for me to know that, mere bread becomes the body of Christ and ordinary wine becomes the blood of Christ through the words which I speak, obviously, to the grace of the Holy Spirit, and yet being used as a channel for that. So it's a very powerful experience. I've been a priest for a bit over 6 years, and that still is profoundly powerful. I'd say that's the strongest experience of priesthood when I'm celebrating Mass.
Yeah. Whether
it's daily Mass with a few parishioners, or Sunday Mass, or the little Mass I celebrate with my family on my day off with 2 or 3 people, it's still a very powerful encounter for me. Yeah.
That's great. Do you have a sense of peace? Is that is a powerful emotion that you experience?
Sure. Peace for sure, and also to know the huge event that's taking place, really the miracle that's taking place, and that God's using me as an instrument. If the priest doesn't say those words of consecration, nothing happens. It's obviously God doing the work, but God working through his weak instrument of the priest. So it's very powerful to know that.
And you said to me earlier on that you never miss out saying doing the mass, even when you go camping.
Absolutely. As when I was growing up, I used to love going to daily mass, and it's a great challenge, obviously, when you go on holidays, especially camping, which I love. It's very difficult to catch mass, but now I just take my mass kit with me, where I
Like
celebrate
that.
mass every day. So take my mass kit with me, and investments which are squashed into the camping gear.
Oh,
and
wow.
so celebrate mass.
And can you do it alone, or you need someone to be at the mass?
It's preferable to have someone for sure. Occasionally I'll be by myself, particularly when I'm traveling, and then I'd celebrate mass, because ultimately mass is never celebrated alone. We believe all the angels are there, and we're connected to the saints at every single mass. So I might be physically alone, but the angels and saints gather together at that event as well. So,
Yeah, that's great.
yeah.
And you said you also really enjoy experience of the confession.
Absolutely, yeah. Confession was a huge part of my life leading up to priesthood. I had the great privilege of knowing a priest who retired, and I used to go visit him, Father Kevin Ryan. I started visiting mainly for himself. I thought, look, he's probably a bit lonely after having such a busy parish life, so I'll go say hello to him, and that sort of turned out to be sort of a fortnightly or sometimes even a weekly encounter. And I thought, well, I'm here with a priest. I might as well ask him whether he's willing to hear my confession, and he was very happy to. So that sort of became a weekly or fortnightly encounter with the Lord in the sacrament of confession. So it's close to that sacrament, and then as a priest to be able to hear confessions is a very powerful experience. To see people coming, and I'm aware that I'm simply a conduit, if you like, for God's mercy. Yes, the person's speaking to me, but ultimately they're speaking to Christ through me. And to be present, to see very powerful encounters where people come burdened with their sin, and to be able to see, not just, obviously I can't see the spiritual healing that takes place, but I can see the emotional relief that they gain through that as well.
Yeah, so they come in looking very burdened and very worrying, and then you see almost like a face makeover. They look 10 years younger.
Right. Often I can't see their face, of course, if they've come for anonymous confessions, which are most of our confessions. But I can hear
their voice,
hear their relief, and sometimes they obviously people can get distressed too, because they're unburdening themselves to God, and yet it's a profound privilege to know that I'm helping them to be sacramentally forgiven by God through the priest.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
it's
it'd
a
be a
powerful
wonderful
experience.
connection.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you were working with at one stage as a chaplain at St. Vincent's.
Yes, I was the chaplain for St. Vincent's Public and Private Hospitals for 2 years. Yeah, that was a tough experience in one sense. It was mainly working with the dying, and sometimes those who have just died, and yet it was a profound privilege as well to be able to give the sacrament of the sick to someone dying, about to leave this world, to be able to comfort the family, especially when there is a late call, like 2 or 3 in the morning, and when I get there, I can see how happy the family is, how relieved that they are, and often they would thank me profusely for coming there and ministering to their loved one. There was a very powerful encounter for me. Difficult, as I said. At the same time, I could see it was I was participating in the privilege of bringing Christ to someone who was on the very border of leaving this world and entering the next.
Yes. So there's some special set prayers you say, and you bless them and you anoint them with oil. Is that what happens?
Absolutely, yeah. There's a special oil called the oil of infirm. So we would anoint the person's forehead and 2 palms. Except if the person's a priest, then you don't anoint this side of the palm, you anoint that side of the palm, because the priest's palms were already anointed when he was ordained. So that's just a little difference for the priest. But yeah, they were, like I said, very emotionally draining encounters, because sometimes there would be 20 members of the family and friends crammed into the room when I enter there if the person's dying, and I have to console both the family and minister to the person who's dying. At the same time, very, very powerful, very rich encounters.
Yeah, that would be, there's a degree, I've worked as a social worker and a nurse, and there's a real degree of intimacy, just sharing, isn't it? Sharing a very emotional time for the family, isn't it?
Absolutely. It wasn't always me giving. Sometimes some of the Catholics I ministered to were highly developed in their spiritual life, and they were completely ready to go.
And so they would give to you.
Yes, sometimes I'd listen to them.
And you get inspired by them.
Absolutely, without any question.
Yes. We need to pause there because we've got to go for a break.
Sure.
You've been watching Spirit of Life, and we'll be back after the break. Hello. Welcome back to Spirit of Life. My name is Geraldine Lee, your host, and our guest is Father Dishan Kandappa. He's been sharing about his faith journey. Hi, Father Dishan.
Hi, Geraldine.
It's great to have you back again.
Thank you.
You were sharing about your experience of being a chaplain at St. Vincent's.
Yes.
And how that was, a great connection with the people.
Yes.
And I'd like to ask about this. What do you experience when you see a suffering person who thinks, why am I suffering so much? I've been a good Catholic. Sure,
yeah. I was asked that a number of times, where I'd go minister to someone and they'd be like, well, Father, why is this happening to me? I'm faithful to God. I've always been close to God. I'm a good practicing Catholic. Why am I suffering so much? I think that they're making a connection, thinking that, well, I must have done something wrong, something bad. That's why I'm sick. So I try, if they're in a lot of pain, I generally don't talk too much to them. I just try to listen. But if they're at a stage where they can comprehend and they're not in too much physical pain, I do bring the example of Our Lady to explain, look, it doesn't necessarily mean that you've done something wrong because you're suffering. Our Lady obviously is...
Our Lady meaning Mary, the mother of Jesus?
Mary, the mother of Jesus, yes. Obviously she's completely sinless, as we believe, and she suffered profoundly. We even call her the Queen of Martyrs because she had to suffer a living martyrdom at the foot of the cross, watching her son die. We know that she lost Jesus for 3 days, and any mother could relate to the profound pain and fear she would have felt. And even with the fleeing from Egypt, when Herod wanted to kill Jesus, she would have known a lot of the mothers and some of those young boys below the age of 2 who were killed. And obviously it would have hurt her motherly heart profoundly to know that they were killed because of her son. So often they can make that connection where I say, look, just look at the Mother of God, how much she suffered on earth. If Jesus permitted his own mother to suffer, surely we should be willing to suffer a little bit. And I do tie it to the cross as well, and encourage them to offer their sufferings to God, to say, look, God, my suffering is tiny compared to what you suffered for me. I offer this suffering as a little splinter of the cross for the salvation of souls. And often they'll be able to relate to that quite well.
Yes, it's true. I mean, I was listening to an interesting psychologist who said that emotional pain can be the same pain of almost a nail in their hands, like that.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
So I suppose she was going through so much suffering, seeing her son suffer.
Sure.
And that would have been very comforting, to be there. I mean, her being there for Jesus would have been very comforting.
Absolutely.
But she would have gone through immense suffering, seeing what her son went through.
Absolutely, yes. She would have felt the pain of the nails going through, exactly to use the example.
And so that seems to bring comfort to people about just comparing that with Mary.
Yes, for sure. And I think it helps them to realize as well, it's not necessarily because they've done something wrong that they're suffering, that there is a whole element of mystery to suffering, obviously. So I do allude to that as well.
Yes, yeah, there's definitely a mystery to suffering.
For sure.
But no, as your father spoke, that that he longed to go to heaven, which is in last week's program.
Right. Yes.
Yes, and the other thing that you also are, you're a chaplain for youth.
Correct. I'm the chaplain to the Archdiocesan Office for Youth. I've been the chaplain for the last year. I love that role very much. I love working with young people. So I work mainly with the Archdiocesan team, and I'm involved in the events that they do. For example, every Thursday we have a Holy Hour for young people at St. Patrick's Cathedral, where we get 80 to 100 young people coming every week. So it's a profound privilege to work with them, to see where they are on the journey, and to be able to help them draw closer to Christ.
Yes, that's great, because you're a young priest yourself,
Right.
and you're going to be the chaplain for them to go to World Youth Day too?
One of the chaplains, yes. I was in Brazil with them a few years ago in 2013. 4 million young people were there, as you know, and we all slept on Copacabana Beach together the night before the Pope's Big Mass.
Yes.
And I'll be going to Poland soon this year as one of the chaplains.
To see Pope Francis.
See Pope Francis.
In the Year of Mercy.
I know, in St. John Paul's hometown of Krakow.
Wow,
So,
that
yes,
would be fantastic.
It would be great. The World Youth Day experience gives us chaplains as priests a chance to have sort of a long-term time with the young people, because we travel together, we go visit different cities together, and because the atmosphere is a bit more casual, sometimes the people who usually aren't that comfortable coming and speaking to you, once they get to know you because they're traveling with you, often they would be more willing to open up and speak about any spiritual issues that they're encountering at that time.
It's a great way to that you connect with youth.
Yes, absolutely. I do love that role.
Yes, and do you also do preparations towards World Youth Day?
Yes. So we recently finished a retreat for the leaders. So we choose a number of young people to be small group leaders, so that they would have 5 or 6 people assigned to them, perhaps a bit more. So we firstly train the leaders. We help them to grow closer to our Lord, and then we have a number of sessions with the people who are actually attending World Youth Day itself before we go on that journey.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful to have this event where you're going to see, with the youth, you're going to see Pope Francis.
Yes.
And when is it happening?
So it's coming up at the end of July, early August. We have a good number going. We go as a Victorian group, so the other dioceses in Victoria and us, Melbourne, we join together and we go as one group.
Oh, that'll be fantastic.
Yes.
Yeah, we've come to the end of our program, but it's been very inspirational hearing about your work and your ministry, and I wish you all the best, and God bless you.
God bless you. Thank you, Geraldine.
You've been watching Spirit of Life, and that's all for our program today. Join us again next week. Goodbye, and God bless you.